Hey, deserving listeners, couples therapy. Let's watch.
For today, this is our last session.
Yes.
First of all, how are you?
Mixed, right?
How are you?
Mixed.
Mixed,
Tony?
yeah. Yep.
It's interesting to observe this kind of response. I will almost always, at the beginning of a session, ask this sort of question. How you doing? Where are you at? Because it's important to know, sometimes clients will have been in a huge fight on the car ride to my office, and it's important that I understand that. Or, since I've seen them last, they haven't had any fights, and they've had a pretty good time. Or, they've had a lot of intimacy recently, and they really like. So I need to know that. It's important information to know, at least for my style of therapy. Some therapists might say, well, it doesn't really matter where they're at because they're up and down every week. I have a protocol that I follow. I'm not like that. I'm very in the moment, reactive to what's happening with the client. In different styles, it's fine. But when she asked the question, Mao was the one who answered the question, which is fine. And he says mixed. And then Annie looks at him and says, where are you? And Mao says, yeah, I'm mixed. And at no time does Annie say how she feels. And at no time does Mao ask Annie how she feels. And let's see if the therapist asks Annie how she feels.
Complain about. It just seems unnecessary. So I guess, this morning we had a little bit of a problem this morning, and I was getting angry. I was even getting mean. I wasn't saying it was all in.
So this is good. This is progress. Without prompting, without anyone asking him to describe this, he volunteers it, which is vulnerable and self-deprecating. He says, this morning we got in a little thing, a little conflict, and I was being a little mean. That's a huge step forward. And when I see that, I want to capitalize and reward that. I might even explicitly say, so, Mao, I just want to announce and commend you that you have made tremendous progress. And then I would describe what just happened. Look at you, that's good. Because it's important to reward stuff like that. And it might be corny, but as I say, if being healthy is being corny, then be corny. And it will encourage them to do it in future sessions. It highlights it. It helps the Annies of the world understand, oh, I didn't really catch that, but I guess that is progress. That's good. So then Annie knows what she might be able to reward as well.
Good.
Not in a good sense, just in the most efficient way of.
Not good.
Not good. And then I was thinking about it, and I was don't. Instead fight that sensation. It's going to pass. It always does.
Can you say something?
So that's good. Again, he's saying, in the moment, I had this urge, I think, to defend myself, and I told myself, just don't. It passes, and just let it go. It's a wonderful step forward, and it's not the end of the road, of course, because what we would want is that he would have empathy and compassion and understanding for Annie in a more comprehensive way. But an iterative step in that direction is learning, even though I feel like doing this, it probably isn't fair, and it probably won't help my situation. That's a good step.
I am touched by what you said, but I'm still kind of scratching my head because when we do get the opportunity to be together, you're uncomfortable. I don't know what these life experiences you want to have with me. I mean, yes.
Because when you do go out.
My hypothesis about this complaint from Mao is that, if I remember right, his mom was, what was it again? His mom was extremely neglectful of him and made him feel like he didn't exist, essentially, right? That he had to grow up really fast. And my hypothesis was that he was a child and always longing for mom to be there, to be a mom. And he has this ongoing feeling of being let down and longing to be close, but at the same time assuming or having a vibe of being let down, and then he transfers that, he displaces that from his mom onto Annie and maybe even onto the therapist, and then complains. So he's longing for Annie, please pay attention to me and love me and be with me and spend time with me and do what I want to do. A 10-year-old might be like, I want to go play putt-putt golf or something. And please just, or watch TV with me or something, and then always being let down. And then he transfers that on to Annie. And then as they're getting close and he's asking for things, and then Annie tries to oblige because she's trying to get her attachment needs as well. He has this sense of like, this just isn't right. It's not what I'm looking for, even though he is getting his needs met, but he has all this unresolved pain from the neglect of his mom that he's just in a state of assumption that when he is in contact with his attachment figure, that it will be disappointing because it drudges up all those feelings from the past. That it seems like a coherent hypothesis given what I've seen on the show, which is pretty limited.
We can do whatever we want.
Sort of.
Well, to our abilities. But we're not bound.
We're much less bound.
What are you trying to say?
I'm not. Go ahead. You know what? I don't need to do that. Go ahead.
Thanks. I don't think I want to do.
All right, step forward. Not great, but a step forward. He stepped back, said, I don't need to do that. And, says essentially to Annie, you're right, I should just be quiet. But not being passive-aggressive. I think that was definitely a step forward.
Like, why? That's what you're doing. You're flipping what I like into being illegitimate or overly indulgent. That's what you do, and you do it to me.
Interesting. So I'm still working on this hypothesis that I said earlier, that he accuses her of being overindulgent, which I imagine he had that feeling as a child, that he would look at his mom and say, she's overindulgent, she's selfish, and isn't giving me attention. And he's transferring that onto Annie.
Delusional. It's this endless, scorekeeping that you do that is, I don't feel bad for myself. That's not who you misunderstand.
But why do you think Annie's doing the scorekeeping?
Well,
what do you think the motivation is?
That is not...
It's a good question from the therapist. The assumption that Mao is making is, it's just annoying that she's doing this scorekeeping, like she's just trying to criticize me, when in more likelihood situation, Annie is keeping score because she needs to defend herself or she's trying to do something good. That's usually what people are doing with that. It's not a good thing to do, scorekeeping, but the therapist asks a good question. Why do you think she does that?
It's not deeply motivated. It's a function of confusion. Okay. What would you like me to say? How can I describe?
Okay, interesting. So he answers the question, and he says it's a function of confusion. Probably a weird way of saying she's stupid. I think that's his go-to defense. And I think he developed that when he was young because his parents were neglecting him and he needed to depend on the self. And so he just decided, they're dumb, I'm smart, I can't depend on those people. So when she asked the question, why do you think she keeps score? He's like, well, essentially, she's just dumb. She doesn't make any sense. But he words it in this veiled way. And the therapist goes, that's an intervention. As therapists, we're always intervening. There's always something, even when we're quiet. That's an intervention. So the intervention is it's a rejection. Like, I'm skeptical. I don't. That doesn't make sense. And then he says, okay, fine. What do you want me to say? All right. So now we're at that precipice. We're at that point where we've run up against the problem of compassion and extending yourself into someone else's world. And let's see what the therapist does to try to facilitate that. Now, the temptation for a therapist in this situation is just to tell him, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea. There's a lot of options here. Let's see what she does.
No, I don't know what the motivation is, but if someone is scorekeeping, they're usually trying to address something.
Well, right. Usually what they're trying to do is they're trying to get an outcome.
What's the ultimate goal?
So good. So that's along the lines of what I would have done. I would have left that space. He's like, okay, what do you want me to say? I would say, actually, I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question. I'm just trying to say that usually when people keep score, there's usually something that they're doing it for a reason. There's usually some logical reason to it. So what do you think that is? And this is an effort to try to get Mao to extend himself. Instead of just thinking in his own box, he has to ask the question, what is going on with her? And by repeating that action in therapy, you hope that it generalizes to the outside world. So let's see what he says.
Compatibility, which actually does exist, but the way that you're focusing on it, I think, fails to address the problem.
But what do you think the problem is?
Well,
fails to address the problem.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. The problem is she doesn't like me that much. She wants.
Interesting. It's very interesting that he said that. So we're seeing the therapist is really pressing on that issue, and his first response is, well, she's dumb, and his second response is, well, what do you want me to say? And his third response, when he's continued to be pressed on the issue, is like, well, she doesn't like me very much, which is a really sad narrative, right? This is the narrative he's trying to avoid, which isn't really true. And you see Annie kind of smirking. I think that it doesn't, maybe Annie doesn't like him that much, but I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is that she's trying to get her needs met, and she wants to have a wonderful, loving relationship with him. And so this is also indicative, and another data point on my hypothesis, that when he's 10, when he was 5, when he was 15, he's being neglected by his mom. He's occasionally allowing himself to think about why, and maybe even experimenting. And kids will do this. Kids will experiment with their parents a lot. And as they, like he'll say, I wonder if my mom likes me. And he goes over to her and might even say, like, do you like me? Or look what I drew. And then the mom's like, get away. And it's like, yep, she just doesn't like me. And that's his assumption, is that people don't like me. People close to me don't like me. And so I just need to depend on myself. And I decided long ago that I'm superior and that I'm really smart and I don't need other people. But underneath it all is this vast sea of need and attachment need and low self-esteem, and everyone hates me.
To be in a different relationship. She doesn't want to be in this relationship. And that's, I think it's I think that's what you want.
So this is black and white thinking that I've been talking about with him, that instead of saying, I think she wants me, but she wants me to be a little different, which is usually what couples therapy is about, he says she doesn't want to be with me, which I don't think is true. Now, there might be times when she wants to leave him, for sure, but I don't think she'd be working this hard in couples therapy if she was done. When people are done, they usually can't. I've had people come into my office, and it's pretty rare, but one person will just be completely done, and it's really hard for them to work in therapy. They just don't have any motivation because all 10 toes are out of the door, and because couples therapy is hard. You got to work at it. You got to put effort into it. There's a lot of mental and emotional energy you have to put into it. A lot, honestly, from everyone, including me, and but particularly for the clients. And so I don't think she wants to leave him. Maybe she does, but that's his perspective. When he stops to think, when he allows himself to, so normally he exists in his own world and he does what he wants, and he is, on the arrogant side of things. But then when he steps out of that box, his first thought, we've seen this repeated in many instances, is she doesn't like me, she doesn't want to be with me. And that's a problem, right? There needs to be another version of his mindset, which is, well, she wants to be with me, but she would like me to be a little different. Let's see what happens.
Like you survived something and you got to somewhere else. And instead of being sort of like honest, I think you're trying to concoct this background and this conflict and these things, and you'd be way better off going.
Interesting narrative that he has. So if I'm understanding him right, his narrative when he steps outside of the box a little bit is she doesn't want to be with me. She's against me, essentially. She's had it out for me from the beginning. but I'm perfect, so there's nothing she can really complain about. So she's concocting a complaint system so that she can beat me up, essentially, which, again, just sounds very similar to the way a 10-year-old would think as they're being neglected by their mom.
I think that she's going to get what she wants.
But when you say, I want more life with you, I'm left wondering what that life looks like. If it looks like what it is, I don't want it.
We've run out of time.
Okay, that's interesting. So that happens almost half the time, or maybe not half the time, but in couples therapy particularly, where in the middle of some very juicy topic, I'll just say, time's up. And in the beginning of my career, I would have a really hard time doing that because it just feels so rude to right in the middle of a thing. Time's up. But as I became more confident as a clinician, I have no problem doing that now. Now, I try, as time is wrapping up, and I know it, that I will try to give signals that the time is wrapping up. And the longer clients are in therapy, the more they kind of know how to pace themselves, because it feels bad for everyone if I have to interrupt them and say time's up right in the middle of something. But the reason why I train my trainees to get used to that is that there's this fantasy that therapists have that if you do that, the client is going to hate you and reject you. And that almost never happens. I've never seen it happen. The client might be a little miffed off, but you can recover, and you can apologize. You can be like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. This is a juicy topic, but we have to adjourn. I'm so sorry about that. We'll pick up where we left off next time, and I'll even make a note right here." There's things you can do, but it's very important to end on time because usually you have a client waiting in the waiting room that you have to get all your crap together so that you can see them on time. And if any of y'all listen to my audio podcast, you know that I am extremely annoyed when therapists start late with their clients, particularly chronically. And a big reason why therapists will start late with a client chronically is because they're going over with the previous client, which is completely under your control as a therapist. 99.99% of the time, it is your fault that you went over with a client before the next client. And have the self-confidence and the professionalism and the ethical stance of just saying, "I'm sorry, it's the end of the time." And maybe you have to go to your therapist, maybe you have to go to your supervisor and get the confidence to be able to do that, but you need to do that. And the therapist just did that, and it's good. Now, another just side note, I think she has a clock behind her, a digital clock. It's blurry, but I think that's for the client so that they can also pace themselves. I don't do that. I actually have a clock behind the heads of my clients so that I can see the time, but I don't have a clock behind me so that they sometimes people will look at their phone and they can tell. But the reason, there's pros and cons. So the pro to having a clock is the client can pace themselves. They'd be, "Oh, I only have 5 minutes. I better get to this topic I want to get to," or something. The con, or the pro to my system, is that clients can just think without having to think about time. I find that we're really obsessed with time as Americans, and it can cause people to be almost hyper-vigilant about time. And I want therapy to be relaxing, and I want people to be in the moment, and I want people to be free. And know that I'll keep track of the time for them. Now, the con to my system is that some clients I'll say it's the end of the session, and they'll be like, "Whoa, but I wanted to talk about this other thing." So, there's pros and cons.
We're out of time in every way. We can be better to each other. And I don't think you're a bad guy, and I don't think you're a bad husband. I think you're a great husband.
I'm the best.
You're the best husband. And I do love you. But you're right. I don't like you. I don't like how you...
Interesting. Another thing, she is being nice, and "I love you. You're a great husband." And then he makes a joke instead of just receiving it. It's too hard for him to open up in a vulnerable way and just say, "Oh, thanks." And he also looks to the therapist in this arrogant way of, I don't know, why would he be doing that? I would suspect, given the dynamics that's been happening, that he thinks of the therapist as kind of a mother figure, as a parental figure. It's common that happens. And he's looking to her for some kind of like, do you hear what she's saying, or making sure that she's hearing this, because I'm quite positive that Mao thinks that the therapist thinks that he's a bad husband. So it was interesting. Let's rewind that, actually. Let's watch the little interchange there.
We're out of time in every way. We can be better to each other. And I don't think you're a bad guy, and I don't think you're a bad husband. I think you're a great husband.
I'm the best.
You're the best husband. And I do love you. But you're right, I don't like you. I don't like how you treat me.
Well, hopefully, I think they said this is their last session because it's a TV show, which I didn't know that was the case. I thought that maybe they would just continue with therapy outside of the TV show. So hopefully Annie and Mao can go to a similar styled therapist so that because I don't know if I show this clip, but they've been to a number of couples therapists, and the longest they ever lasted was 3 sessions, and they've lasted 11 sessions with this therapist. So hopefully they've found someone, because I think they've seen some progress for sure, and there's still a lot to work on, and I think they're both willing to do that.
Okay.
So that's that.
That's that.
Okay.
Now, if this truly was the last session, which I think it is, I would have, as a therapist, stopped them about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes at the end of this session, and I would have summarized. When I know it's the last session with a client, I definitely have a lot of things I want to do that are not typical to a session. I want to say, so I just want to say it's been really great working with you. Here are the things that I saw you do. Here are my recommendations. Essentially it's a discharge session, and I want to provide them with my final observations and summary, and also my recommendations. She didn't do that, though. Maybe because it's a TV show and they didn't ask her to do that. But this feels a little awkward because Annie's like, so that's it? Like, I'll never see you again? And the therapist's like, yep, that's it. So usually you want to have some kind of meaty conversation about that.
Take care of each other.
Always.
Just take care of each other, okay. And that's nice. And Annie is having a hard time getting off the couch. I think Annie's thinking, but that hasn't changed enough. That's why I'm here. So I think that's what's happening. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.